Mercedes ZEROPOD became a bit of a joke in the F1 paddock, but while we were laughing at it, Adrian Newey saw a challenge. The RB20 has been unveiled to the world, and despite some clever camera work and lighting, Red Bull haven't been able to keep the big trick of their 2024 car secret. The media seemed more interested in what Christian Horner had to say about the investigation launched at him, but the real scandal at the RB20 car launch is how Red Bull have taken Mercedes' failed design from last year and implemented it on their own car. Today I'm going to check out the RB20, talk about the crazy innovation they've shown and all the parts they've managed to keep hidden, and why this is terrible news for the rest of the grid. So let's get started. On Thursday evening, Red Bull became the 10th and final team to unveil their car for 2024. Ahead of their title defense in the year ahead, the RB20 was revealed to the world at the squad's Milton Keynes base on Thursday, with Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez amongst the team members on hand as their new challenger was revealed. There are no surprises in terms of livery, with the car continuing to carry the outfit's traditional navy blue colour scheme. And while the team have opted for a more aggressive concept, they will also be hoping for no big changes in regards to the car's level of performance. Its predecessor, the RB19, enjoyed unprecedented levels of success in 2023, netting victory in all but one of the 22 Grand Prix to take place during the season. Verstappen bagged 19 of those 22 wins as he sealed his third driver's title in Qatar with several races to spare. It hasn't come as much of a surprise that the incredible performance of the RB19 has meant that the rest of the grid have decided to copy the concept of that car. Every car revealed so far has a similar bulbous side pod with a massive lower lip. Every car has rearranged their suspension to try and get the same anti-dive effect that Red Bull reintroduced in 2022 as well. That is just the way of things in F1. When you show the rest of the grid how good an idea can be, they're all bound to want to copy it and compete with you. That has worked throughout Formula 1 history, but there's always a risk in doing so. When you're trying to imitate another team, they will always be a couple of steps ahead, innovating on the design that you're just initializing. So, while the rest of the team launched their versions of the RB19, Red Bull launched their version of the pre-Monaco Mercedes W14. But more on that and what makes the design so exciting in a second. First, I'll quickly cover what the team said about the new car. "I'm happy with the direction they chose," Verstappen told the media at the launch. "I saw the drawings at Abu Dhabi at the last race and I was like, wow, that's quite different in a way. They've not been conservative, let's say like that." Verstappen said Red Bull's ambitious approach is what I like about the team. "We had a great package, but they took the chance to be innovative and go all out, I would say, and try to make it better. Of course, time will tell if it's really good. But from what I see within the team, everyone is just happy with what they've achieved in the wind tunnel. But then again, we don't know. You can't control what the other people do. This aggressive innovation isn't without its risks though. Red Bull clearly had a winning formula in 2023, and to take such a massive step away from that is an incredibly brave choice, and the team must be confident in the new concept to make the switch. However, Max doesn't believe the team has taken a risk with its design changes. "I think it's controlled aggressiveness," said Verstappen. "Everyone is just happy. It doesn't seem like it's a question mark, like they're not entirely sure." So what have Red Bull done exactly? The reshaped engine cover on the RB20, which resembles the design used by Mercedes last year, is one of the distinctive features of the new car and the one that will definitely catch the headlines. "I would still call it a Red Bull style," said Verstappen. The RB20 also appears to have adopted another common feature to recent Mercedes, the narrow side pod inlets. They were partly obscured from view beneath the lights at the car's launch, as were a number of other parts such as the floor edges, which were completely devoid of features. Mercedes used a similar design throughout 2022 and for the first races of last season, before moving away from what was dubbed the zero side pod design. That design was destroyed by Toto Wolff at the start of 2023, when his team were 0.6 seconds behind Max Verstappen after qualifying for the season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix. And just 2.5 months later, in Monaco, Mercedes showed off their RB19 Stars side pods instead. Everyone thought that would be the end of the ZEROPOD concept. There were plenty of memes with a photo of Red Bull designer Adrian Newey looking at a Mercedes car with captions like, "Idiots, I could make this work," or something similar. Not that anyone seriously thought he would try it. But when there's an interesting space for innovation in the F1 technical regulations, someone will try to take advantage of it. Mercedes failed, but will Red Bull as well? Rival teams have been offering up their own renditions of the big lower lip inlet and undercut solution that Red Bull has developed over the last 2 seasons. But Red Bull has ditched the lower lip on the RB20 and has a big, sticking out upper lip instead. That big upper lip is an extension of the top surface of the sidepod. This means that the RB20 has this big ramp that starts in front of the cockpit and finishes just in front of the rear wheels. This differs from the rest of the grid, whose sidepod ramps start at the rear of the cockpit instead. Below that big upper lip is a tiny little inlet, which at the launch of the RB20 was pretty much completely invisible. The lights were smartly placed above the car, leaving a big black space below the upper lip, which gave away no details. But based on the images taken of the RB20 being shaken down at Silverstone, you could make out a vertical inlet that hugs tightly against the side of the cockpit. It is a very similar sidepod inlet to the Mercedes W14 launch car, but the differences are also hugely significant. This is not a ZEROPOD W14 with Adrian Newey's touch. This is an innovation on the RB19 undercut sidepod, taken to the absolute extreme with the help of the ZEROPOD concept. The Mercedes ZEROPOD cars featured almost no sidepod at all. Instead, they had this slope from the top of the car to the floor edge with almost no undercut. The RB20 definitely still has a bulbous sidepod with an undercut. They're actually massive when you see them from the front, but the inlet into them is definitely inspired by the ZEROPOD. There must be advantages to this new design. Red Bull won't have just done it for the hell of it, so let's see if we can work out what they may be. First, it's important to keep the purpose of the sidepods in mind. The whole reason there is a hole in the front of an F1 car is to let air in, which then passes over the cooling apparatus attached to the engine, which then takes heat away from the engine and out the back of the car. So cooling is the primary purpose, but as with everything on an F1 car, the sidepods have to offer more than just their primary purpose, so the teams designed them to aid the aerodynamics as well. How the Red Bull cooling systems are laid out within the car is a bit of a mystery, but this new design will be in aid of making the cooling more efficient. The less cooling parts you can use, the lighter the car will be and the faster it will go. So, if you can make each part cool better, you can have less of them. Having less cooling parts also lets you minimize the external bodywork cross-section, especially in the critical downforce producing airflow areas, which helps decrease the drag produced. So with this new sidepod design, Red Bull have ended up with a vertically compact sidepod that sits very low on the car. The top surface of the sidepod starts much further forward than anyone else's and includes the gully or waterslide design that Alpine introduced to the grid. Having this huge surface with the trough in is an aerodynamicist's dream, as it'll channel loads of air toward the rear axle, where the diffuser and beam wing are, creating loads of downforce. And remember, Red Bull have done that while reducing the cross-section of the external bodywork, which will reduce drag. You make a fast F1 car by reducing drag and increasing downforce, which this design definitely does. The vertically compact but very wide sidepod creates a massive undercut between the floor and the sidepod. This is where the big difference between the W14 and the RB20 is most obvious. Mercedes never had this huge undercut, and that's likely where they went wrong. The undercut channels air to 2 places. Firstly, it directs it over the floor edges, which are vital to the performance of the Venturi tunnels under the car. I've spoken about these loads before, but in case you missed it, the floor edge is shaped to create vortexes of air that trap the airflow under the floor, forcing it out of the diffuser, increasing the downforce generated by the floor and the diffuser. The second place the air gets channeled is to the rear axle, where it meets the air that has gone over the top of the sidepod and passes over the diffuser and beam wing. It's all good stuff. There is another really interesting change to the sidepod, and that is the big shoulder, also called a cannon quite often, that starts where the halo ends and runs to the rear of the car. These cannons house more cooling equipment, and the air that comes in through the hole in the rollover structure passes through them and out at the back of the car. This is another design that has taken inspiration from the W14 release spec. These cannons form a channel on the external bodywork from the air inlet in the rollover structure all the way to the rear of the car. This channel will take air to the rear aerostructure, improving the performance of everything back there. The big difference between the Red Bull design here and the Mercedes design though is that the cannons on the RB20 drop aggressively at the rear of the car, allowing those channels to release their air lower than the W14s did. That was a lot of information, so I'll give you a short summary. The new Red Bull side pod is designed to channel as much air as possible onto the diffuser, beam wing and rear wing, while minimizing the cross-section of the car to reduce drag. They've done it by taking inspiration from the W14 and combining it with their own undercut side pod design. As Max said, it is aggressive, it is definitely brave, and knowing Red Bull and Adrian Newey, it'll probably work really well. I'm not saying we might see a repeat of 2023 this season, but the rest of the grid needs to be afraid. What do you think of the new Red Bull car? Are you surprised they've taken inspiration from a car that Mercedes thought was so bad they got rid of it after one competitive session? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.